Welcome back to the Pro Football Hall of Fame for another installment of the Pro Football Hall of Fame series before the snap. Now, I know we've been off a few weeks. I hope everybody enjoyed their spring break, their time off, but we hope you're back in the classroom this week, gearing up for our last run here at the semester. And we are sorry. We know we're coming to you live right as the second day of March Madness is kicking off, but we hope you got that. We got you pulled up on a screen and you're watching those games there on another one. If you've never tuned into this before, well, what are you going to hear? Well, you're going to hear what it takes to have a career in and around the NFL, about what it takes to get a job, keep a job, and all the tips and tricks for you as a young professional or a college student or even a high school student to find that job that best suits you. And if you've tuned in with us before, you obviously know you're in store for another excellent program here today. As always, my name is Jake Ray. I'm the Youth Education and Leadership Manager here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, where it's our mission to honor the greatest of the game, to preserve its history, to promote its values, and to celebrate excellence together. And those values we promote are those of commitment, integrity, courage, respect, and honesty, all of which made our 378 Hall of Famers the best football players, best football minds there are. And it made them great people as well, and can make you a great student and can make you truly the best member of an organization that you end up working in if you're not already there today. Before we get started and introduce our special guest today, some thank yous I'd like to pass out. First, I'd like to thank all the teachers, educators, professors that watching us in their classroom, sent to this to their students, or watching this 6 months down the road. We appreciate you allowing us to be just a small part of your students' learning experience this year. Secondly, I have to thank the students. Students, as always, this is your chance to interact, start a networking journey, ask questions to somebody who currently is working in the NFL today. And we're going to hear all about social media today. So I'm really hoping we have a good audience to tune in and learn all about what it takes to work in such a popular and ever-changing field within the field of sport. So students, as always, if you're watching us, go ahead in the comment in the chat section, throw your name and your school you go to. We want to see all the great universities that we have represented here today. So do that right now. Go ahead and throw your name and the school you go to in the chat. And then throughout the program today, like always, we're going to be taking questions. So if you have a question, go ahead and put it there in the chat as well, and we'll do our best. Nathan's going to sift through all of those and ask some of the questions from our students here today. And we'll be constantly reminding you guys to get those questions submitted as well. Lastly, we do have to thank our special guest today, Ms. Maggie Yanchulis, who works for the Washington Commanders in their social media department. Maggie is the social media manager for the Washington Commanders, graduated from George Mason University in 2021 with a degree in sport management. She previously worked at Caesars Sportsbook and Major League Baseball and has interned for the Special Olympics and the Washington Spirit. She was raised in Northern Virginia with her three sisters and all have a deep love for the DC sports scene. She gained a passion for social media by starting a Washington Nationals fan Twitter account in high school, honoring her favorite player, Nationals great Ryan Zimmerman. So we're super excited to have you on today, Maggie, and welcome to Before the Snap.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. You nailed the last name pronunciation, which a lot of people struggle with. So thanks for that.
Good.
And yeah, excited
I took a risk. Normally I ask if I'm not sure, but I'm like, this has got to be it. I'm just going to take
you
a shot.
nailed it.
Hopefully
So
we're awesome. Well, Maggie, we're super grateful to have you on Before the Snap today. And as always, we just kind of want to start out for getting a grasp on, what you do on a day-to-day basis. So can you kind of give us that 10,000 foot view on what a normal day in the life looks like for somebody who works in social media with an NFL team?
yeah, so I'm sure you've heard this by everyone who has done this program before, but no 2 days are the same. I think it depends on like the time of year. Obviously, right now it's free agency, so we've had a lot of new players in the building, especially us. We've been very active this free agency. So I think it just depends on if it's in season, if it's off season, balancing. I feel like we always have a million different things on our plate, whether it's ticketing initiatives, marketing initiatives, business, football, like especially in social media, like everyone wants us to promote what they're doing across our entire organization, football and business side. So I think it's a lot of prepping and planning, a lot of meetings, and then a lot of idea generation. I think it's important to spend a lot of time just like creating content and giving yourself the space to do that. Whether it's looking at what other teams are doing, thinking about tent poles coming up. So yeah, like I said, it's really different every day, but it's very fun and exciting.
You mentioned something I want to kind of dive into a little bit more there. And, a lot of people we talk to, they're either the football side, they're working with the team, developing a roster, working on contracts, or they're the business side, the marketing, the advertising, the stadium ops. They're, they all work together, obviously, but there is some separation. Now, just in your little brief synopsis there, you talked about having to balance promoting stuff for the business side, promoting stuff for the football side. So how does somebody in your role, show, pretty much just be fair is the easiest way to say it. Obviously on Sundays, it's going to be a lot of football stuff, there's sponsors to promote, then there's giveaways to do. How do you balance, supporting both kind of ends of the spectrum within the organization?
I think the big thing is just over communicating, especially with people on the business side. I think it's important they might not know that we have a roster move coming later in the day, or they might have something going on at halftime, but we're losing at halftime, and it wouldn't make sense to post it then because it would just get killed. So I think it's not just saying like, no, we can't do this. It's saying we can't do this right now, and here's why, and here's when we're going to post it instead. So I think it's just showing like, we have other priorities, and sometimes business stuff is the priority. It all depends on the day, but I think it's just explaining, at the end of the day, like, we are a football team, and so if there is a football priority, that has to come first. And so I think it's just showing the business staff, okay, we can't post this right now, like I said, but we can post this tomorrow, or we can post this later this evening, and just making sure that everyone's always on the same page and everyone's kind of always understanding what you're thinking and why you're doing what you're doing.
Along those same lines, how important is it to have an adaptable mindset? Obviously, especially in free agency, you could be sitting in your chair at your desk for 1 minute, and then 10 minutes later, you've signed 3 free agents, and you have to get a graphic out, and you have to work with the graphics team. You got to work with the PR. You got to work with the contract team to make sure all the numbers are right. Especially this time of year, how important is it to have a sense of adaptability and something that students can kind of take, to heart as well, being able to adapt to certain different situations that might arise.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something I struggle with a little bit because I like to be over prepared. So in a perfect world, I would have had every copy written for every free agent, but that's not the case because we don't know who we're going to sign. Things can change at a moment's notice, and so I think it's just constantly like be thinking, have something like written. So we'll have like, oh, if we sign a wide receiver, we could write this. If we sign a cornerback, we could write this. But then you sign like an Austin Eckler, for example, and you don't want to use just the generic copy you had written for a running back. You want to use something a little more exciting. So I think it's just kind of having stuff ready, but then knowing that you can have something generic ready to go, but then like there is always that opportunity to level it up. And yeah, just kind of always be on your feet. I think like it's hard because there are certain times where it's like, okay, we know that something could happen in this 48 hours. So it's a lot easier because you're ready, you're by your computer. But I think the hard part is there is always a chance that something could go haywire. Or there could be an announcement on a random Sunday night when you're sitting on your couch. So I think it's just kind of always being ready and having a good support system because it's hard sometimes to just be like, oh, I have to think of copy for this, this, and this. So I have like my team and my coworkers so I can lean on and be like, okay, like I'm thinking this, like, what do you guys think? Like, does anyone else have any ideas?
Two follow-up questions for that. One is kind of a fun one, and two, I have a legit follow-up question to that. What is the latest in the night, early in the morning, that you had to get up and send something out or get something together because there was some sort of breaking news?
I think the latest at night would be, and obviously this isn't as fun scenario, but the Damar Hamlin situation that happened in 2023 on in the football, the game playoffs. I think that was something that we were like, okay, like this happened. Like our other like, is this something we should get out right away? Is this something we should be responding to? And then we decided that yes, we did want to reply to the Bills and kind of show our support there. And then I would say the earliest in the morning would probably be like 6 a.m. the day of a game, announcing if a player was going to be active after being hurt.
So it's literally is, you don't know when it's going to happen. Another thing is, when you think of social media, I think the stereotypical thought is, you're on your phone 24 hours a day, tweeting, posting, liking, sharing, whatever it might be. But there's so much more that goes into it. You've talked so much already about writing copy. So can you give us maybe 2 or 3 things that students, if they're interested in social media, need to be good at? Do they need to be good writers, and how do they get better at that? What are some things that if students want to get into this field that they need to have a good grasp on, like, being a good writer?
Yeah, I think like you said, and I've said a few times, being a good writer is definitely important. I think like I still struggle sometimes with like, oh, should a comma be here or should, so I think like that kind of stuff is hard. And I think that like I definitely lean on like we have a copywriter that I lean on a lot to be like, can you just check this, especially for like a lot of like the more like tentpole months, stuff like that, that we have like more structured copy for. So I think definitely being a good writer. And then I think just being a creative mind and being open to not having a good idea. And that's a weird thing to say, but like I think I was so afraid when I started working here that I was going to give out an idea that people didn't like or people thought was stupid. But like there are going to be those, like there are going to be ideas that don't land, and that's okay. But just being willing to like throw things against the wall, because sometimes people can take that idea you had and level it up, or sometimes you just have a good idea, or sometimes it's people are like that doesn't really make sense to me. But just being willing to share, even if sometimes it's not going to be the number one hitter.
Definitely. And you have it goes back to being adaptable and knowing that sometimes you might have a bright idea, but maybe it's just to you, it's a bright idea, not to everybody else. But there are going to be moments too where you do come up with those ideas and it does stick and it does hit. Um, like you said, it's, you mentioned when we first started, not every day is the same in this job. So it's very interesting to hear all the tips and tricks that students can take, even right now, students, to help better yourself for life down the road. So with that being said, I'm going to throw it to Nathan Martin, who's sitting down the hall here for me, looking at all the great questions we have coming in on YouTube, and were submitted ahead of time. So we're going to throw it to Nathan here to ask some of our students questions.
Yeah, thank you, Jake. And Maggie, thanks for being on the program today. We'll dive right into these student questions because we got a ton of them that were submitted prior to the program, but I want to encourage those of you that are watching the program live. I saw some of you mention which school you're watching from, but send in your questions. We want to hear from you. We'll include those as best as possible throughout the program, but we'll start here with some of them that were pre-submitted. This is from Sadie, a student at Boise State University out in Idaho. Curious, Maggie, what experience do you think students need to have, or experiences that would be beneficial for them to land a position like you have working in social media for a professional sports organization?
I think one really unique and awesome thing about social media is you can have experience in social media just by posting on it. You don't have to necessarily have a job that you're doing social media for. So you can, I think, like a cool idea would be like to come up with like either you come up with your own brand, or you make an Instagram like a brand or like a sports team, and you just start posting on it and gain that experience that way. Like I said, like Jacob mentioned in the beginning, I had a social media account that I would tweet about the Washington Nationals on in high school. And that is honestly like what people want to talk to me about most in every single job I've had post college. People are really interested in that unique experience because at the end of the day, everyone's done internships, everyone's done things to make them stand out. So I think just making sure you have something unique about yourself, whether it be, like I said, a social media account that you're running for your favorite sports team or your favorite TV show, or if you just want to make memes about Seinfeld or The Office, like whatever it is, just find that thing that makes you stand out and use that and run with it.
I'm not very good with the memes, but they can be funny, and you can spend a lot of time on social media looking at those types of things.
Oh yeah.
So we'll wait to see the Washington Commanders, new thread of memes done with this program here today. Love that answer though. This next question comes from a student, Norman, Liberty University, wants to know, in your experience, I mean, I'm sure when you graduated, you had to send out the resumes and the applications. What do you think helps students stand out? Because a lot of job postings, and I don't know if you've been given the opportunity yet to start hiring some entry level or interns, and if you have, speak to that. But what helps those resumes, those applications stand out when you're getting a pile of, 200-300 different applicants?
Yeah, I think one thing that stood out to me and something that I didn't do when I was applying for jobs, but it's something that I have seen when we've hired our interns for the past few seasons, is like reaching out on LinkedIn and being like to me or to a colleague and being like, hey, I applied for this role. Here is my resume. Here's like a little blurb about me. I think, like you said, like on Teamwork Online or whatever it is, when there's 400 applications, teamwork isn't always the best at like filtering them and searching by keywords. So having that and bringing it to the top of people's minds, the top of people's inboxes, is a good way to do it. I think also I do personally think that cover letters can help. I think that they can help tell a story in a way that resumes can't. And I know that that's a controversial topic these days. I think a lot of people think that cover letters should go extinct. But I think that if you have something more unique, bringing it back to myself, like Twitter account thing. It wasn't on my resume because I didn't really know how. I couldn't put it like, oh, I run a Twitter account when I was in high school on my resume, but it really worked in my cover letter. So I think for something like that, especially when you have something that isn't necessarily a job experience, that's where a cover letter can really assist you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. As trying to like fit something like that that's unique can be challenging sometimes on the resume, but you can utilize that cover letter to your advantage. So I think that's a great piece of advice for our students that are watching. This next question comes from a student that's watching live here. Miles attends Sewanee, the University of the South. And Miles' question is it's pretty generic. So speak to, the best of your experience and what you've seen working with the Commanders. Is there a particular major that stands out that students could pursue that you think would set them up to work in sports? Or maybe you're like, there's all kinds of majors here. So kind of speak to that.
Yeah, there's definitely a wide variety of majors. I think it depends honestly on what your school offers. I would say a lot of people who work in social media did journalism. If I was going back, I probably would have done journalism myself. I think sport management is great if you don't know what you want to do in the sports industry, because I would kind of describe it, at least how it was at my college, George Mason, as like a general business degree, but like sports. So I was taking things like sports finance, sports economics, things that I knew I didn't want to do. So I think journalism, like I said before, like copywriting and writing in general is a really big part, and researching stuff that I think journalism offers. I think journalism, PR, communication, sport management, those are all things that I see a lot with people who have my roles or have similar roles to me.
Lots of different major options there for students that are watching. So I think that's encouraging just to know that it's not, one particular field that you have to, major in and study in to get yourself a job working in professional sports. Last question I got here, and then we'll continue to get some from Jake and allow the students more time to submit more questions. This comes from Ellie, and Ellie is a student at Nova Southeastern University. Maggie, how different is your day in the season versus the off season? And I know you touched on that a little bit with Jake, but maybe just touch on that a little bit more, the differences between in season and off season.
Yeah, they're very different. In season is very, very structured. Obviously, there's a few times where it's different because you have a Thursday night football game, but for the most part, it's like, okay, Monday's the team's off day. They do community things on Mondays, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, like Tuesday through Friday, the team practices. Sunday is the game. So I think in the season, we have a very structured, okay, Monday, we're going to post about the community events. Tuesday through Thursday, we're going to post about practice. We're going to do highlights from the previous game and then start prepping people for the upcoming game. And then Sunday is game day. In the off season, it's very different. There's obviously like the tentpole events in the off season, draft, free agency, training camp, stuff like that. And then there's the day to day, which sometimes big like news breaks during that time. Sometimes there's things to announce, like the team was like having a new jersey or a jersey retirement or something like that, like a big tentpole thing that like isn't an NFL tentpole event, but is a tentpole event for the team. And then it's a lot of planning and preparation. Right now, we're kind of finishing up our big free agency period and getting ready to start planning for draft. So it'll be a lot more meetings. It'll be a lot more planning for the next season and how we want to approach if there's any brand guidelines we want to change. So I think like we spend all off season getting ready for the season, because in the season there's not as much time to have those big in-depth planning meetings. It's a lot of like, okay, you hit the ground running and you just go full stop until bye week. So I think it's nice to have the off season to do a lot more of the planning so that in season you're ready to go.
I think that distinction between in season and off season makes a lot of sense. You mentioned the draft. Before I send it back to Jake, I just got to see, do you have any insight on what we can expect the Commanders to do? They haven't told you yet, the draft board or anything like that?
I will find out just probably 30 seconds before you guys do on that first night one of the draft. So unfortunately, I can't give any insight there.
I thought I'd ask just in case. But hey, back to you, man, with some more questions for Maggie.
Awesome. Thanks, Nathan. And along the same lines, I kind of wanted to ask the same thing, but, in a serious note, do you have to have like 5 different tweets or 5 different posts ready to go, depending on, obviously having a high pick, there's only a certain number of people that could be picked there in those top 3 picks. But do you have to have those prepared when it comes time for the day 1 of the draft?
Yeah, so I think looking at last year versus this year is really different. So last year we had the 16th overall pick in the draft. So Well, we could have some things prepared, and we did. We picked like 15 guys that the mock drafts had us taking, stuff like that, that we could kind of come up with an initial graphic for, some copy ideas for. There really is, like you said, so much more that could happen when you have the 16th overall pick. Now we have the second overall pick. There's definitely a few guys in particular that most people think that we would be leaning towards. I think there's always the chance that we could trade back, we could trade up, but like in theory, we're probably going to pick at that number 2 spot. So we definitely can be a little more prepared. Like I said, I have no inside information, so it's just like guessing based off things we've heard from mock drafts, etc. But we definitely can have the opportunity to be a little more prepared this year for a few different guys, which is helpful if that happens. But who knows what's actually going to happen on that night one.
I'm sure it'll be fun no matter what happens. I want to talk a little bit about, working in sports. It's a question we like to ask because, while sports is a lot of work, there's not a lot of off days, especially for somebody who works in the field of breaking news and having to get the word out because, I'm guilty of it. I'm sure a lot of people are today is like when there's breaking news, they don't go to their local paper's website. They don't go to, a magazine. They're going to Twitter or X, excuse me. They're going to X and searching that for that news story. So in that world, there's, so much work that goes in, but there are rewards to that, getting to be behind the scenes, getting to be part of so many big events. So, in your relatively still young career, has there been a moment that sticks out to you as your favorite? That when you kind of take a step back and look at, look at your life, look at your career, that kind of makes you go, wow, I can't believe I was there.
Yeah, I'm going to give 2. The first one is my first game working for the Commanders was Monday Night Football when we beat the undefeated Eagles last season. And that was a surreal experience to be there at Lincoln Financial for that game, to beat them, to have like the opportunity to have like, I don't know, it was like my first NFL game day working it, and it was such an exciting one. I'm a really big Taylor Swift fan, and I used Taylor Swift lyrics for the final score copy, which was very fun for me. So I think that was like a game day that really sticks out to me. One, because it was my first, and 2, because it was such an exciting game. And then on a different note, but still very exciting, was the day of our ownership change. So that was July 21st. This past year was like the day it became official. Our new owners were at our stadium, and just feeling the energy from our fan base on social media. That was such a surreal experience. It was so cool to be able to share those first moments of Magic Johnson meeting Terry McLaurin, all of that, like being able to be the first people to share that and be able to share in this excitement that our fans really had. Like it was definitely like the most positive day, I would say, like on social media for our fan base. So that was a really cool experience to be a part of.
Very cool. And I'm glad you brought up the Taylor Swift piece of this, because I think it's really cool and so much strategy goes into it. And it's kind of skirting that line of, we are a professional organization, we are a business, we have to have a professional voice on social media. But then there's that other side that you kind of just hover your foot over sometimes, where you do have a little fun. You do go back and forth with some other teams. So for you, what is that balance like, and how do you maintain a professional voice on social media as the Washington Commanders, but you're still going to have a little bit of fun doing it as well?
Yeah, I think it definitely is like there's a time and place for the fun. There's a time and place for obviously the seriousness. I think, for example, like for free agency, every team posts some sort of meme that says like, oh, the social team doesn't get involved with free agency decisions, which makes some fans upset because they're like, well, you're the only people that we can go to like yell about what's happening. So I think like that's a big meme that people do. I think like around the draft, there's a lot of opportunity to have memes. And then just kind of in the day to day, we try to find little opportunities, whether it's like the day in the middle of winter that it was 80 degrees in the DC area. We posted like a photo of Olaf melting to be like, oh my God, why is it 80 degrees in January? Stuff like that. So try to like manufacture content that's not necessarily around a tentpole event or not around a holiday, just something fun outside. But I think also like game day, for example, if we're losing 20-0, like we're not going to have any fun like that. Then it's like becomes very businessy, very like we're informing fans. I think that's another thing is like we get a lot of like stop posting if we're losing, but like at the end of the day, our job is to also inform and to also be like an informant of what is happening in the game. So I think there is a line of like, okay, yes, we're still going to post when we score a touchdown, even if we're losing, and we're still going to post the final score graphic, because our part of our job is to also inform fans, even when it's not necessarily as fun as the other days.
I know that there's definitely some social media folks out there that you do hear from if you don't post the final score. So I always think that that's an important thing to do. Um, looking at your career, obviously you had, a passion for social media at an early age, and you took steps to find a career in that field. So for students who kind of know what they want to do but don't know how to get their foot in the door, we talk about that idea of networking. What are some things that these students can do right now to start growing their network, to find that job that they love? And in the same breath, what are some things that you did, to set yourself up to get the position that you're in now?
Yeah, I think one thing, I know like a lot of people mention LinkedIn, but I think that one platform that a lot of people, especially in the social media sports world, use is Twitter. Get involved in the conversation. I think like a lot of social media people will tweet like things that they're working on, will tweet projects, will quote tweet projects that they've worked on. I know like the Falcons video team really did the overhead camera. They really like spearheaded that this year, and like their videographer who started it tweets a lot about how they started it and like hyping up other teams for using it rather than being like, oh, they're copying us, which I think is cool. So I think getting involved in that scene and just like tweeting about things that you think are cool in the sports industry or things you think are unique, and connecting with people that way and following people. And I think LinkedIn's also a great example. I think like if there's somebody who has a job you want, it doesn't hurt to reach out and be like, hey, can I have 30 minutes of your time to talk about your job? That way, if one day you are applying for a job there, then maybe they would remember your name. I think also don't get discouraged if people don't respond. People who work in the social media or in the sports industry do, I'm sure, get a lot of DMs on LinkedIn about people asking to connect, people asking for time. So I think don't get discouraged if one person doesn't respond. They might not be big checking it. They might have too many DMs to answer. So I think might as well shoot your shot. It's not going to hurt you. They're not going to be like, oh, I can't believe this person reached out. The only thing I think that it could do is help.
And, I think it's important to continue doing that. And you mentioned, working with other teams and seeing the trends. How do you do that? How do you, work with these other teams and, you see the trends, like you talked about the camera, there may be a thread that a team does that you think, oh, that's a really good idea, we should do that. Is there any sense of, hey, they're copying me, or is it all kind of a good, little niche within the NFL of all these different social teams working together?
Yeah, I don't think there's any like super, oh my God, they're copying me vibe. I think like obviously you want to try to take a unique spin on it and not just be like, oh, they did this, we're going to do this the exact same way. Another thing that I like to do is like I've connected with like the other sports teams in our area. So it's getting myself out of the football realm and like talking to the people who run the social at the Nats or the Capitals, and kind of seeing how we can collaborate. We did a big collaboration with the Nationals last year, which is cool because I think obviously if you're a fan of the Commanders, there's a higher likelihood that you're going to be a fan of the Nationals as well. So kind of being able to collab our fan bases and kind of get more of that like DC love out there is another cool way that we've been doing this past year, and something we're going to try to continue to do. Obviously, we do the good luck graphics for every team, but trying to kind of step it up from that. And instead of just doing like a good luck graphic, like maybe do some sort of collaboration, like Washington Spirit sent us jerseys. So we posted like our Dan Quinn holding that for their home opener, just kind of trying to show fans that our teams are connected, since we're all in the same city.
What is your favorite event to post about? Is it free agency? Is it the draft? Is it the start of the season? Is it the schedule release? What is that one moment where you're like, I cannot wait to get this out and hit that send button to make this public?
Probably the draft. I think it's so exhilarating that night one of the draft, and then into the second day where the first round pick is there in the morning and you're ready, and then you have another thing that night. It's definitely the most tiring weekend of the NFL calendar, in my opinion. But I think that the draft, it's everyone, even if you had a bad year the year before, even if you like it, everyone is excited. Like everyone has a renewed sense of hope in their team, I would say, around the draft. And so that's a really cool thing to be a part of. And it's a really exciting time.
Now, while we were doing our intro and we were getting some of the questions from our students, I got my computer right here, so I went to X and looked you up, and looking through some of the tweets you had reposted there, and assuming it's a family member, but is there that's in almost the exact same field as you are, more on the writing side and writing stories. So, can you tell us a little bit about that relationship, and how cool is it to have two women from the same family? I think working in such a place in sports where they have a huge voice for so many people, so many followers, readers, and things like that.
Yeah, so I think that was one thing that was really inspiring to me when I was growing up is I have three older sisters and two of them were working in the sports industry when I was going through college. So my oldest sister, Kate, she works for the Sporting News. She's the managing editor there. And then my second older sister, Kelly, was the Authentics manager for the Nationals. So yeah, three of the four of us are really into the sports industry, which is cool. And I think it was, like I said, I think as a woman in sports, it's sometimes hard. You don't see as many people who are also like many other women. In my major in college, there would be some times where I was literally the only girl in my class. And so I think having my sisters who were so inspiring to me and showed me really that like I could do it. And like even when I was applying for my current job, I sent it to my sister and I was like, I don't think like I'm qualified. And she was like, you are. Like she was like, you need to like stop selling yourself short, like you are qualified. And so I think just having those people in your corner, whether it be your sister or it be a mentor or even just a friend that you can find to be like help you realize your full potential, because I think it's hard to do as you're growing up and getting out of college, and like there's a lot of imposter syndrome and being like, oh, I am not good enough to do this. So I think having those people who can help push you are really important.
That's a great message for anybody tuned in for there. No matter if it's your sister, or it's a friend or a professor or somebody within that field. Find that person that you enjoy reading or following or listening to talk. And the worst thing they can say is no or not answer you if you reach out with questions. So I would also encourage you to find that person, because that's going to help your career grow exponentially as you get closer and closer to having a career in sports. So, Maggie, at the beginning, I mentioned what we're about here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It's, honoring the greats of the game, all 378 of our Hall of Famers, as well as all the NFL legends who have, really changed and made the game of football what it is. But it's also about preserving its history. We are a museum. So what we do our best is, tell the story of professional football from all the way back in the 1800s, all the way up till today's star. So we what thought better way to showcase that, actually go out live into the museum in front of some artifacts that pertain to your career a little bit. But we got Jerry Shockey, the Senior Director of Youth Education and Leadership, out in our museum, who's in front of some of those. And we're going to show you and all of our audience tuned in today a little bit about our museum. So, Jerry, whenever you're ready, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Jake. And thank you, Maggie, for tuning in. Thank you to all the students that are tuned in from across the country. Awesome opportunity to network and just learn about the field, and especially social media that many of you are probably very interested in. So I'm welcome to the Lamar Hunt Super Bowl Gallery. This is a space inside the museum where the biggest game for each season is highlighted. There have been great dynasties, right? With franchises like the Green Bay Packers, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the New England Patriots. And obviously now we have the Kansas City Chiefs. But Washington is not a stranger to the Super Bowl. The franchise has won 3 Super Bowls in 83, 88, 92. And I'm in front of a display that actually features the helmet for Washington QB and Super Bowl MVP Doug Williams. And it was during Super Bowl 22 in 1988 that Williams became the first African-American quarterback to not only start in the Super Bowl, but to win a Super Bowl and then to go on to win Super Bowl MVP. Now, Maggie, hopefully you'll get to experience the Super Bowl championship someday. But even if you don't, we know you're a huge Washington sports fan. So is that challenging now we have to be a little bit more quieter with our allegiances because we represent all 32 NFL teams, but for you as well, there's got to be a level, and I heard you talking about earlier, just a level of professionalism that is there. And so how challenging is it to have that balance between being a fan versus being an employee of the Commanders?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's definitely hard, I think, sometimes because I'm like, I care obviously so much about our wins and losses and our record, but I think it's also cool because like you were showing, I do know a lot about the team's history. I was at Art Monk and Daryl Green's retirement in Canton. My whole family went, and then my parents were at the 1991 Super Bowl. So I think like all of that experience really helps me because I do know a lot about our history, and I think that helps me because I can speak to it a little more. For example, like we just had, like you said, like all of the anniversaries of all of the Super Bowls. So in posting about those, in posting about some alumni birthdays, not that I necessarily couldn't research that if I ended up working for another team, but I have a lot of firsthand experience through my family, through myself growing up that I can help use, which I think is a really unique aspect of working for a team that you grew up watching.
All right, thank you, Maggie. Appreciate it. And Jake, I'm gonna send it back to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jerry. Thanks for that look into our museum. And you know how cool Zoom is, with all this AI, Jerry's giving a thumbs up, and the thumbs up bubble keeps popping up. It just goes to show how, how cool some of this technology we're here is using today. Maggie, you've talked so much about your career and, all the good sides of it. There are some challenging parts as well. It's not all, flowers and rainbows every day when you walk into the office. So what are some things, that are challenging to you that you see as challenges day in and day out with your career? And what are some things you do to kind of curtail those and go against those, to make sure you're doing the best you can do?
I think the biggest challenge is the like constantness of it, in season, even out of season. Like I basically bring my computer with me everywhere I go. In season, there's always something happening on a Saturday. There's always a roster move to be made. So I think finding the work-life balance is definitely the hardest part because social media is so always on. There is something you could always be commenting on. There is March Madness going on today that we could try to get into, especially during the off season, to get the engagement up. So I think it's just learning when to take a step back and when to be like, okay, I'm gonna like lean on your teammates and be like, I'm going to be off the grid for the rest of the night. If anything happens, like you guys can handle it. I think that's hard because it's all right here. Like my work, our social media channels, my email, my Slack, it's all right on my phone. And so I think definitely with working in sports, finding that work-life balance is the hardest thing.
But it's also, it's very hard, but it's very important as well because especially in the field that you're in, it is constant and there's continual updates and breaking news and so many things that you have to, be on top of. But it's important to have a team, like you said, that you're working with. So can you talk a little bit about, what you don't have to go into the full structure, but how does the, your department work together? How many people? Are there different roles and responsibilities that everybody kind of work together? And this, how important is it to have that team around you to, to make sure that your job and your goals are being met as best as they can be?
Yeah, so our content team consists of our video team, our graphics team, our editorial team, our team photographer, and then our social team. Our social team is, I would say, on the smaller side, but I don't actually know that for sure. It's me and one other person, and then we have one intern and then our boss. So there's four of us total, off and on, depending on if we have an intern at the time, there's three. So I think, yeah, really using them to lean on, really leaning on, like when we signed Bobby Wagner, I wasn't at the office at the time. And so I was like texting our video department being like, can somebody try to think of something we can, because like, especially during free agency, things get posted by the national media, but then we can't actually post and confirm until they're in the building signing the contract. So there's usually a weird 24-hour gap between when it happens and when Adam Schefter's tweeting it and then when we can actually tweet it. And so for a big one like that, we wanted to have something. So he ended up finding like a Sopranos clip of saying Bobby, and then we posted it. And so I think using that to be I literally had to pull over in a Target parking lot to post that. And he was able to find the meme for me and put the graphic on it. So just everyone can come up with content ideas and using those people to lean on when something happens at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday and you're on your way home, using your coworkers to help.
Awesome. Well, we got Nathan back, had a bit of a computer issue. So, technology, it can be great sometimes and it can be bad other times. So we're going to throw it back to Nathan here for some more questions from our students.
Yep. Thank you, Jake. Next question from our student. This is Michelle from Merrimack College. Wants to know, Maggie, what is one thing that you wish that you had known or someone had told you while you were applying and going through the interview process with the Commanders that you know now that you didn't know back then?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, I think that one thing that I wish I knew was that, and I could be wrong, but I think this is truer for the NFL than other sports. The off season is not very slow. My sister worked in baseball, and I feel like the off season was very slow for her. I feel like she was, working from home a lot and using that, you really having that time to recharge for the season. I feel like in football, it's kind of an always on. There's like a 6 week period in like June and July when players and coaches go home for summer break. That's like very slow. But for the most part, like I'm still going into the office 4 days a week. Like we're still really like gas on the or foot on the gas. And so I think that that's something that this is only my second off season with the team. And so I think like learning from that first off season where I feel like I didn't give myself that enough opportunity to take a break. So kind of trying to find that balance of like, yes, off season is still busy, but you really need to find time to rest and recharge so you aren't burnt out throughout the season.
Yeah, that has to be an extreme challenge, I can imagine, and especially when it's something that you're so passionate about. I mean, you love, Washington Commanders football and just everything around that, and you're like, I could do this 365 days a year, but you have to find time to rest in there, for sure. Our next question comes from Annie Reynolds, a student at Boston College. Annie wants to know, with the social media world, what are the methods that you're using to stay updated on the latest trends and kind of know how to continue to resonate with the audience that lives on the different social media platforms?
Yeah, I think the biggest way is to be active on them. I'm obviously scrolling on TikTok, but I also try to take time to scroll on like the Commanders TikTok For You page because it's going to be very different than my personal. And so I think it's important, like on our For You page from the Commanders, I'll see like a lot of our fans, I'll see a lot of other teams, and then also going out of my way, like during free agency, like this past like few days after kind of like the big like chaos of free agency, I went back and I did go back and see like what other teams did and how we maybe could have done changed something, repackaged our signing photos and selfie videos, stuff like that. So just kind of taking a look back at the end and being like, okay, like for next year, like here are some takeaways. I try hard not to, when I'm too much into the thick of it, try to compare to what everyone else is doing, because at the end of the day, like we are trying to be unique and we are trying to have our own voice and our own way of doing things. So I try like really like for the draft, I won't during the draft go and be like, oh, how are they posting about the draft? After the draft is over, I'll go back and be like, oh, here are some cool things that other teams did that we could take either going forward into training camp or take going into next season. Because I think when you're in the weeds of it, sometimes it's hard to compare in that moment because then you're like, oh, should we be doing what they're doing? But there's no right and wrong way of doing social media. So I think it's important to kind of try to still keep that uniqueness.
Yeah, it would certainly be challenging in the moment, in the thick of it, like you said, to pivot and totally change a strategy that you guys have probably spent, weeks, if not months, preparing, for a big event like that. But something stood out there too that you were talking about. I feel like the rest of us, we try to avoid getting caught scrolling in those For You pages, and we spend a lot of time on social media, and it's like this is your job. Like you're getting paid to spend time on those pages, and it's just funny that, if you don't work in the social media space, it's like, oh, how can I use social media less? But you're like, no, keep using social media. We're going to post content that you want to see.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen a lot of people posting recently, like, oh, like take social media breaks. A lot of my friends have been like, oh, I'm not going on social media on the weekends, like cleanse. And I'm like, that must be nice for you, but like, I literally can't do that. So it's definitely, it gets hard sometimes to be so online, but
no doubt. This is the last question I have from a student. There was a lot of questions we didn't get to, so I do want to remind students that are watching now or watch later, feel free to connect on LinkedIn or follow Maggie on social media. Connect with her that way. Send your questions and build that network. We talked about networking a little bit today. So definitely take advantage of that opportunity. But today's question, or the last question today from our students, this is from Amanda, a student at the University of Akron, so local to us. What steps would you encourage someone if you had to give them, here's step 1, 2, 3, if you have that many, would you encourage someone to take to get into a similar position that you have today?
it's a good question. I think don't be afraid to do something that's not exactly what you want to do to start. I don't like what a lot of people say, especially like they're like, oh, in order to work in the sports industry, you have to start in ticket sales. Like everyone starts at ticket sales. I would be terrible at ticket sales. I knew going in, I was like, that's never going to be able to cold call somebody. So I don't like that people try to put people into that. I think it's important to get in where you can, but I think you don't have to say like, oh, you have to start XYZ. Most of the internships I did in college were in marketing. So none of them really were in social media. There were just less internships in social media for the Spirit. We were such a small team that I was able to do some social media stuff. But I think don't be afraid to do something, even if it's not necessarily exactly what you want to do. Even my last job was in paid social, so very different. We were doing like all of the ads you would see on Twitter and Facebook, but I was able to learn still a lot of different experiences. I was able to learn a lot more about copy because there's all the ads. And now going into my current job, we don't do as much paid social, and I don't have as large of a hand in it, but I do feel like I'm more well-rounded because of that. So I think don't be afraid to do something that's maybe not what your dream job right away. And you can always find those other examples, like I said, of making it social. Like if you're working in marketing, you could just say like, hey, I'm really interested in social media. If I could shadow for a day, or if there's anything I could help with in that realm, just to kind of get your foot in the door more.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, and that's similar advice that we've heard other people offers, which just means it's good advice. A lot of people are saying it. Just not being afraid to do different things, but also not feeling like you have to. Like so many people say, "Oh, you got to start in sales." Like you don't necessarily have to. There are other opportunities out there. Find what you're passionate about. Find what you're good at, and chase it. So I really appreciate all that advice. I hope the students appreciate that advice. But I just want to thank you, Maggie, for taking an hour out of your day, an hour off of social media to us and answer our questions and tell us a little bit about your career. So on behalf of myself and the students, thank you. But I'm going to send it back to Jake because I know he's got a couple things he wants to wrap up with here.
Awesome.
Yes, thanks to you, Nathan. Thanks to all of our students who got questions, and the same goes for me to you, Maggie. Thank you so much. I've got Twitter open. I don't think we've had any breaking news yet, so I think we're okay. I got a couple more questions for you here. One's more of a fun rapid fire segment, and then we'll wrap up with one final question. That sound good?
Perfect.
All right. First rapid fire question: LinkedIn, a great way to network, or just another social media app?
Somewhere in the middle, but lean, a great way to network.
Okay. Number 2, GPA on a resume. Keep it on or leave it off?
Leave it off, but if you graduated with honors and you want to put that instead.
Okay. Number 3, social media accounts, public or private?
Public.
I think that one's going to carry a lot of weight from this conversation. Number 4, jeans at work, all day, every day, never, or only on casual Fridays?
We're running around so much, so I'm usually in like leggings and a sweatshirt. So jeans are dressing up for me, honestly.
Number 5, coin toss, heads or tails?
Tails.
And then my final question, you score a touchdown. What is your go-to touchdown celebration?
Like I said, I'm a big Taylor Swift fan, so I'd probably do the bow and arrow, Sally, that she does at her concerts, and Travis started doing a little bit in the playoffs.
Very cool. I love that answer. You're getting so much great advice today, so many great tips and tricks for that next generation to come into the sports world. But I want to end today with one final question. And it could be something you've already mentioned that you want to reiterate because you believe it's so important, or it can be something we haven't brought up yet today. But if you could leave the students with one thing, they watched the entire program today, but they're only allowed to walk away with one thing. What's that one thing you want the students to take away from today, and something that they can apply to their lives in the classroom or even as an employee of an organization?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned this before, but my big thing is always believe in yourself and advocate for yourself. You have to be your number one supporter. I think there's so much outside noise, and there's so many people who it's easy to compare. It's easier to say, oh, they're doing this better than me. Oh, they're doing, if you post something and it doesn't get perceived like the way you wanted it to, and then fans come at you negatively. Like there's just so much outside noise, and you have to be your biggest supporter, and you got there for a reason. You are doing what you're doing for a reason, and you have every capability of doing what you want to do. So just, make sure to always be your number one supporter.
All right, with that, we're going to wrap up this installment of the Pro Football Hall of Fame's Before the Snap series. Today, featuring Maggie Yanchulis, the social media manager for the Washington Commanders. Maggie, as just like Nathan said, thank you so much for giving time out of your busy day, giving time to talk with us today and all of our students. It means so much to us, and we cannot thank you enough for being part of the program today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
To everybody who tuned in today, again, thank you so much for getting me time out of your days to watch and learn a little bit about what it takes to have a career in and around the NFL. Before we wrap up today, as always, make sure you like, follow, comment, subscribe, all the things on all of our Pro Football Hall of Fame social media channels. We're going to have some awesome information coming out here in a very, very short amount of time. So make sure you're tuned in to all of that. Follow the Commanders as well and see all the great things. Now you know the voice behind the tweets, behind the post. Give them a follow. Means a little bit more when you know who's hitting that send button on the other end of Twitter there. So make sure you follow them and see all the great content coming out from them as well as we lead in here to the NFL draft. For those of you who watch us here on Before the Snap, we're going to be off another week. While you'll make sure you have time to go celebrate some holidays with your family. So we will not be live next week. However, we will be back on April 5th with another 2-for-1 type program. We're going to have Christian Edwards and Matt Conti, who both work in football communications for the Indianapolis Colts as part of the program. So a very interesting program, getting to hear from two people who work in football communication. So for myself, Nathan, Jerry, all of us at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, as well as Maggie, our special guest today, all the students, thank you so much for tuning in.